Welcome back to Turpentine VC, the podcast where we discuss the art and science of building successful venture firms, VC to VC. In this episode, I sat down with Greg Castle, the managing partner of Anorak Ventures, a seed stage firm focused on emerging technologies. Anorak's early investments include Oculus, Anduril, Flexport, Flock Safety, and Rec Room. Up ahead, you'll hear Greg discuss spatial computing's future and how the industry's biggest players are quietly positioning themselves for the next great computing shift. Please enjoy. Greg, it's almost been 4 years since I last had you on the podcast. Welcome back.
Great to be here.
So Greg, by way of introduction, for those who didn't yet listen to the first one, why don't you briefly introduce Anorak and how you came to get it to where it is today?
First of all, shame on you for not listening to the first one if you haven't.
Exactly.
Second of all, Anorak is a VC firm. We're focused early stage. Been investing out of the firm since 2016 as an angel investor. Myself, I've been investing since 14. And we invest in companies that are leveraging emerging technology to provide a competitive advantage in a variety of fields, everything from waste management through manufacturing. I got my start in the video game industry in 2010. And got my start as a venture capitalist by making an angel investment that came good in Oculus. And that kind of kickstarted my VC career. I developed a reputation as somebody who knows maybe a little bit more than others in VR and AR. And I leveraged that to get into great deals and to eventually start Anorak. So, we are pre-seed and seed. We're writing checks anywhere between $250 and $500K. And I'm based in LA and my partner is based in San Francisco.
That's a great overview, and Oculus is quite the win to build off of. Our last episode is a deep dive into AR, VR, and I want to do the same here and how it's evolved since we've last spoken. You call it spatial computing. You like that phrase. Why don't you unpack what that phrase means to you and unpack a little bit the vision that got you and has kept you so excited about the space?
So I broadly bucket a bunch of different categories into spatial computing, and I broadly define it as kind of computing in the third dimension. So, traditionally we were dealing with the input was, originally punch cards and vacuum tubes and things like that, but eventually moving on to keyboard and mouse and basically inputting information into computers manually. And you were trying to do a variety of things by inputting this information into a computer, from simple computations to simulations to just storing data. And as time has gone on, we've started to develop tools that enable us to more easily capture the real world as it exists, both capture and do things with, compute and things like that, and also recreate the real physical world in 3D. And that started with, 3D game engines with John Carmack back in the day. Video games was one of the main areas that kind of pushed this whole thing forward. There were simulations before that, but in terms of the general public, when you needed to, or when you wanted to recreate a whole 3D environment for gaming purposes, that was an incredible feat to do. And so, whether or not you're talking about recreating whole 3D environments for gaming, for simulation, whether or not you're talking about understanding 3D environments using computer vision, you're talking about interacting with 3D environments, AR, VR, robotics, all of these areas are using a lot of the underlying same technological principles. And I kind of bucket them all together in this kind of category of 3D spatial computing.
Can you say more about those principles, or more about like what, if we understand them, helps us predict what's to come?
Yeah, I mean, when leveraging the power of computers was relegated to people inputting using a keyboard, there was this kind of meat bottleneck of how do you get information into the computer so that you can do things with it. We're at a place now with compute where you don't need to input everything manually. We have all of these amazing technologies that enable us to bring in vast amounts of data using things like computer vision and RGB cameras, LiDAR sensors, all these different things that enables computers to amass massive amounts of data in order to be able to do different really interesting things with them. And that's really been a step change. And it's resulted in the need for all of these, other massive areas of technology like cloud computing and storage and all of these different things, because we're able to pull in so much more data now. I mean, this isn't really a new thing, right? This has been a gradual evolution that's been going on for some time. But when I was first getting going, there were a couple of funds that came out that were just focused on like AR, VR, and some of these other areas. And I really felt as though there was a lot of shared knowledge, shared technology amongst a bunch of these different spatial computing areas that I didn't want to come in and just focus on a specific vertical. I wanted to come in and kind of explore and invest in this whole kind of emerging area of spatial compute.
Totally. So let's make this a bit more visual or concrete for folks. Let's say we're doing our next episode in 2028, or even we're talking in 2038. Like let's say the Anorak vision, materializes. Paint like how is the world a little bit different if some of the hypotheses that you have about these spatial technologies come true, kind of beyond your imagination? What changes?
We've been talking so far a lot about ingesting data, but I think also a more natural way in which we interact with technology will also come to fruition. And that will be not necessarily staring at a screen in front of you and having headphones on yourself. I think that, we will, as we are able to understand what's going on in space, as computers are able to understand more and more what's going on with space, in kind of the world, the ability to create more natural interactions with technology will progress and evolve. I think we've made advancements so far, but it is still a rather clunky way in which we interact with most technologies. I think, the phone being the most obvious one, this small rectangle that, so many of us spend hours and hours and hours on every day. There is going to be better ways to interact with technology, whether or not it's AR glasses, it's voice, it's, whatever it is. I think that will certainly evolve. This conversation that we're having right now, I don't know if it's 2028 or 2038, but it's likely that it won't just be me staring at a screen talking to you through a webcam. It'll probably be something much more immersive where, we really feel like we're in a presence. I mean, right now, if I look at my 3D environment right now, the little box that I'm interacting with you in maybe makes up 2% of my total vision. I don't really feel like I'm with you right now. I feel like we're having a conversation, but I know that I'm in my office and I know that I'm talking to you. And it's not the ideal way to interact with people. We just had a bit of a tangent, but we just had our annual LP meeting in person. And it's the first time we've held our annual LP meeting for the first time in 3.5 years. And there is just nothing like being together with people. All of the visual cues that you get from somebody, being physically with them, being able to do different activities with them, it's just, there's nothing like it. And I think that we've got a ways to go. So I think, if you're asking me what things are going to be like 10 years from now, I think how we interact with each other over distance is going to change and be much more immersive. I think how we interact with technology is going to change and be much more immersive. Those are probably two of the main things.
That makes a lot of sense. Building off that, how should we think about how AR and VR are going to intersect, or what kind of use cases might make sense for either? What's a mental model or framework for thinking about that?
So in terms of how they're going to intersect. Look, the technologies that they're using are quite similar. Ours is harder from a technical standpoint, very much, because with VR, you're basically just replacing the environment with a digital environment. For AR, you need to understand the environment around you if you're going to, it depends on what level of immersion you want with AR. But if you're going to place objects accurately, if I'm going to go to a party and I'm going to see names floating above people's heads and notes about the last time we met them, like, understanding an entire environment is really challenging. So, a bunch of shared technology, but AR is definitely harder. I think that, where I get excited about VR, I think from an entertainment standpoint, it's great. To date, we've seen some amazing gaming experiences. Anybody who's tried on an Oculus headset and had some time in it has probably played one or two great games. We're beginning to see communication applications that are getting better or that are out there. You can easily kind of see that. I think where we haven't yet, where we're just really starting to see some traction, is in training and education, which I think is going to be radically transformed by virtual and augmented reality. We as humans learn three-dimensionally. And there have been many studies that have been put out that prove that if you are actually, doing things yourself, that time to absorb and retention is vastly improved. And, I think we're just scratching the surface there. And I'm really excited for what that future looks like. Medical, education, manufacturing. There's just so many different areas that I think are going to be, where VR training is just going to become the standard, and for good reason. AR, I think that we're farther out from. There are some people who are making good progress there, but I think we've still got a little while. But I don't necessarily see like an intersection of the two in the future. I think that they serve different purposes, and that's the way it will be.
Yeah, totally. Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Even if you think it's a bit overhyped, AI is suddenly everywhere, from self-driving cars to molecular medicine to business efficiency. If it's not in your industry yet, it's coming fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and computing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? Time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, plus all your AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for compute and 80% less for networking. So you're saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI for new US customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/turpentine. That's oracle.com/turpentine. Hey everyone, Eric here. In this environment, founders need to become profitable faster and do more with smaller teams, especially when it comes to engineering. That's why Sean Lanahan started Squad, a specialized global talent firm for top engineers that will seamlessly integrate with your org. Squad offers rigorously vetted top 1% talent that will actually work hard for you every day. Their engineers work in your time zone, follow your processes, and use your tools. Squad has front-end engineers excelling in TypeScript, React, and Next.js ready to onboard to your team today. For back-end, Squad engineers are experts at Node.js, Python, Java, and a range of other languages and frameworks. While it may cost more than the freelancer on Upwork billing you for 40 hours, but working only 2, Squad offers premium quality at a fraction of the typical cost, without the headache of assessing for skills and culture fit. Squad takes care of sourcing, legal compliance, and local HR for global talent. Increase your velocity without amping up burn. Visit choosesquad.com and mention Turpentine to skip the waitlist.
So we've looked at the future. I want to kind of reflect on the past. If you were to look back at kind of the different waves of kind of the inflection points, let's say within VR, AR, or spatial computing more broadly, how would you characterize the different waves or step changes along the way?
Of spatial computing specifically?
Sure.
Well, I think it's certainly evolved over time. It continues to evolve. It's difficult for me to think of like specific inflection points. I certainly think that Oculus was an inflection point. I think that Google Glass was an inflection point for very different reasons, right? I think Oculus is a very positive inflection point. I think Google Glass did what it was supposed to do for Google, which was help them understand how people would react to an AR device. And I think that they learned a lot. I think people often point to Google Glass as a massive failure, but I think Google would probably disagree with that. Like, I think that they put it out as a beta and they obtained a ton of data from it as to how people react and like all that stuff. It was never going to be something that moved the needle from a revenue standpoint or anything like that. I think it was an experiment. And I think from the perspective of an experiment where you go out and you test a hypothesis, I think it was incredibly successful. It showed that people are more concerned about privacy perhaps than we thought. But if I'm honest with you, and this is one of the challenges, I think. And look, I'm no computer historian, right? There are people who you can talk to who are way smarter than me in this, who will probably point to like, early RGB sensors, early computer vision models. Like, there were definitely a bunch of things in the past where we made advancements in software where we were able to like, start to classify objects when we saw them, where we were able to do like simple things like that. So I'm sure that there are a bunch in the past. I don't know them off the top of my head. I think, one of the challenges for AR, VR specifically is that really we only have one player that's really pushing the industry forward. And consumers don't win when there's one player. Consumers win when a lot of people are excited about a specific industry and start to come out with competing products and are always kind of one-upping each other, right? Whether or not you're talking about the automotive industry or you're talking about the mobile phone industry or the laptop industry, whatever it is, in the past, competition has always been a good thing for consumers. We just don't have that in AR, VR. We have one company that is investing a huge amount of money. For how long, we don't know. I mean, I don't think that Mark is going to give up on AR, VR. I think he's going to keep on pushing it forward, but we're missing that. I would say that like, if another company came out with another headset, that would probably be another inflection point. Like if Microsoft really got behind, I mean, the HoloLens is a great piece of hardware. You could say that that was perhaps one of the inflection points. It was still very bulky. You could almost argue that that was still kind of a beta product. I think another inflection point, although we don't know when this is going to happen, but when Apple comes out with a headset, that will certainly be a massive inflection point. My partner always says this. He's like, nobody has the ability to make something cool like Apple does. Like, computer watches used to be the sign of a total dweeb, right? Calculator watches. Apple Watch comes out, boom. Wireless headphones, used to be Jabra headsets that, made you look like a total nerd. AirPods come out, boom, everybody's wearing them. Like nobody has the power to do that like Apple does. And when Apple decides that they're ready to get into the industry, even if it is for like a very pro product, where they're just catering to maybe a relatively small number of people, like they do with some of their super powerful high-end PCs, it will be a game changer for the industry.
And what's it going to take for them to get that conviction, or for Meta to I mean, zooming out, we're going through this AI moment, and of course, there's been all this build up for AI for decades, and similarly within VR, I'm wondering what's it going to take for there to be this even a smaller version of what's happening now with AI, but this VR moment.
Well, Apple doesn't do anything half-assed, right? Like Apple doesn't put out beta products. Oculus was happy to put out a DK1, a DK2, get a bunch of feedback from developers. Apple doesn't do that. So Apple will do it when they damn well please, like when they really think that the product is ready to have an Apple logo on it. What's it going to take for others to get into the industry? I mean, it's funny. This might be like a little bit of tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, and I have nothing to base this on, but my gut tells me that like Microsoft and Google and Apple and a bunch of the other larger technology companies are quite happy to watch Zuckerberg burn a tremendous amount of money to really understand. Like, he's proven that this is kind of unprecedented. Like, as far as I know, there haven't been a lot of CEOs in the past who have been willing to go as far as Mark has gone. And if I'm Microsoft, and Facebook is doing a ton of the heavy lifting in terms of developing the technology, in terms of getting developers excited, et cetera, in terms of, experimenting with safety and all those different things. I'm sitting back and I'm happy to watch how things go. And then when I'm ready to make a move, I'm going to make a move. It's not like they're sitting there not doing anything, right? Like, they are definitely, working on projects, working on partnerships. Like, I think that there's no doubt in anybody's mind that the future of technology is not going to be these rectangles that we carry around in our pockets. Like, I think everybody in the technology industry understands that there's going to be, there are going to be better ways to interact with technology. It's just a matter of timing. It's the same as us in venture. If the timing is off with your bet, then it's a bad bet.
Totally. Too early is the same as too late. I'm intrigued by this kind of, AR glasses take over the phone. Like, is it going to happen incrementally? Like, what do you think is the first use case that's going to transfer over to what we do with our phones to, what we might put on for glasses? Or like, how do you think that transition might play out?
So I think just accessing information in a more natural way is probably the first thing. I think audio is kind of the sleeper here. If your phone knows where you are and your phone knows what your schedule is and you have it on you, it being able to relay information without necessarily visual cues, I think is kind of where we will start to just become very merged, with technology. It's not the singularity, but the issue right now is that AirPods still only last, maybe a day. They get uncomfortable after a little while. And so it's still not a complete interaction. To be honest with you, I actually think a lot of the issues that we have with why we still use the rectangle is ergonomics. Like, whether or not you talk about the ergonomics of VR headsets or earphones or whatever it is, they're just not comfortable to wear for long periods of time. And it is still relatively taboo to, like, you don't want to be having a conversation with somebody who has AirPods in. But once those AirPods become tiny, maybe once they even become to a point where you don't even see them, and you have the ability to customize a whole bunch of different things about them, and it has the ability to understand when is a good time to feed you information, when is an inappropriate time to feed you information, all of those different things. I think that is where, that is when we will all have these kind of assistants that are just in our ears and that have the intelligence to be able to interact with you in a way in which perhaps a human assistant would. A human assistant isn't going to come in and tell you a piece of news when you're in the middle of a podcast, when you're having a conversation with somebody else. They're going to understand context. They're going to understand what's happening around you, and they're going to feed you information when it's appropriate. So I think that is probably going to be the next kind of step function in, change, should we say, in how we interact with technology. And, we're kind of talking about AR, VR, but I'm talking about audio. But like, this is why I bucket a whole bunch of things under the same umbrella of spatial computing. It's really computers understanding what's going on around you in the environment, where you are, all of those different things. And I think it's all kind of part of the same thing.
Totally. Yeah. I'm imagining almost a personal trainer for life in all meetings being like, hey, this person's upset at what you said, or, say this, or kind of, on a podcast, like, remember this about Craig, and maybe this is also where kind of spatial computing and AI can intersect potentially in terms of, or a ChatGPT like thing in terms of giving you the right information in the right context when you need it.
Completely.
So let's say that Mark Zuckerberg made you his signature advisor for thought experiment, given your Oculus experience. And why don't you first explain what you see his strategy to, like, what's his hope and his kind of approach to what he's doing with metaverse, and what advice would you give him, or what would you do if you were him, perhaps?
Okay, this is just going to be my unabashed advice. Do you know what a nerd trap is? Have you heard that phrase?
Yes, people say crypto is a nerd trap sometimes. It's something that gets nerds excited but doesn't have like real outcomes or something.
Yeah, so I think that VR and Oculus has become a bit of a nerd trap for Mark. When I hear him, when I watch Oculus Connect, or whatever the hell he calls it now, Meta Connect, and when I hear him talking about Oculus, I think maybe he's gotten a little bit better about this, but he goes so deep into the technology way too frequently without really focusing on why people should care. Nerds care, sure, super cool. Like a bunch of the technology that he's doing, he's pushing forward. He's pushing forward a bunch of technologies that have broad applications that will hopefully benefit humanity. And I love that. That's really cool. And as a nerd myself, I like a lot of that. But like, as somebody who wants to see VR and AR succeed broadly, he needs to focus a lot more on why people, the average person, should care, and what are the benefits to them in their everyday life. How is it going to improve their lives, their relationships, their free time, etc. That is my advice to him. And I think that there's probably, I don't know from a strategic standpoint how this would look, but I do think that doing things with the Kronos Group and with some of the other kind of organizations that are trying to push the entire industry forward would be beneficial. They do a lot of things behind closed doors. And I think if we're looking to make AR and VR much more of a reality, I think we need to help push the entire industry forward, not just Meta. We need to get a whole bunch of people involved in order to kind of make this happen.
Yeah. When the metaverse announcement came out, there was some big concern in the crypto community just about, hey, is this decentralized future actually going to be pretty centralized? And I think Meta was trying to take 50% off kind of interactions that happen within the their universe. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the centralization versus decentralization plays out.
Yep.
From a strategic perspective, like, what use cases do you sense that he's most excited about, or you kind of outlined the future that you see. Do you think he sees a similar future? Do you think he's excited about a different future? Do you think he has certain use cases in mind, or how would you outline what you know of that perspective?
They're certainly excited about gaming. I think they're excited about exercise and fitness. I mean, Mark's comments from the beginning have been like, all about connecting people. And that's been, I think, part of his rallying cry and kind of how he's tied and this whole strategy into the core strategy of Meta. It's this ability to connect people in more real ways. But yeah, I think fitness, gaming, general connectivity, certainly they're pushing Horizons hard, although doesn't really seem to be getting the traction that I think that they had hoped. But that kind of central location for people to get together, I think like the social element of VR is what they are, where they're kind of most excited about spending most of their time on.
Yeah. So I asked you a question for Facebook or for Meta, and you kind of detailed a little some advice for Apple as well. What about Microsoft? If Satya made you his special advisor, what advice would you be giving them? / what do you identify as their strategy at the moment?
In the beginning, it seemed as though Microsoft was taking the same approach that they've taken throughout their history, which is focus on the software and let other people build the hardware. That has changed a little bit in recent times. Like they've definitely pushed, their Surface products and they've gotten into hardware as well. But I think that strategy is a sound strategy, like just focusing on the software. Like when Microsoft first started to go, that seemed like what they were doing. They were working with Lenovo, they were working with Dell, they were working with HP, they were working with all of these different companies to produce a variety of different hardware products that were going to be ultimately powered by some version of Windows. So I think that that was a sound strategy, and that is the strategy that I would probably continue if I was them. Like, partner up with others to develop the hardware, and you guys develop a unifying software for, in order to power these things, essentially. They started to do that a little bit. And then, to what I was saying beforehand, like, I think that the uptake was probably slower than some expected. The impact on bottom line, less than what a lot of people in the industry hoped. And, it seems as though Microsoft really pumped the brakes on their efforts there. And I can't say I blame them. And I think that they are probably waiting in the wings, developing and making sure that when they feel the industry is ready, and so I think that's that's a sound strategy.
Do you see Google as doing something similar, or how should we think about Google in this space?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure about Google. I mean, Google has Android, and they did just recently announce, I think, that they had major cuts in their AR/VR department. Clay Bavor, who headed that division for like 12 years or something like that, recently left and has his own startup now. So I don't know exactly what they're doing. I mean, they're certainly putting money into hardware, with their line of phones, which seems to be continuing to grow. I mean, I am on a Pixel phone. Their line of watches and a bunch of other things. Like, it seems like they've got, they're really kind of building that muscle in hardware. But to be honest with you, I'm unsure of what their strategy is. It probably is something similar to Microsoft, kind of waiting in the wings, developing their technology, ensuring that they're partnered up with the right people so that when they want to jump in, that they're prepared to do so.
Is a much smaller company, obviously, but is Snap a player of note at all in the space, or what should we think of their contributions or attempts more broadly?
I think they're a player in the space. I think that they're pushing things forward. They don't have the R&D muscle of a Microsoft or a Facebook or Google. Like, so, when you look at Spectacles, like, neat piece of tech, but I don't think that it's necessarily groundbreaking. But I mean, they've got a great audience, a young audience, an audience that is willing to try new things. I really commend what they've been doing in terms of their efforts with Spectacles and just various, kind of using geospatial information, and like, they just have a new, I'm 43, like, I'm still on Facebook kind of, but I miss the whole Snap thing. But whenever I see it, I'm like, if I was a kid, this is kind of what I would like social to look like. So I think that they're doing great, and I think that they'll be in a position to be able to capitalize on this movement of AR, VR, and audio.
No. Is there a company we haven't yet mentioned that you think could be a sleeper or is just really important in helping get to this VR moment?
I think Qualcomm has some really great efforts out there to push the industry forward. They're developing a line of chips specifically for XR. They have a consortium that they've gotten together. They have a metaverse fund. Like, they are definitely trying to push the industry forward in that sense. So I really like them. Yeah, that's probably the only other big player. I mean, there's certainly some players over in China that are developing some interesting tech. But it's going to take a while. It's going to take very deep pockets, and I don't know that many companies that have the staying power to be able to kind of really push the industry forward like Meta does.
Yeah, talk more about the possibilities for this sort of concept or even kind of ideology behind it. Is it sort of like a second coming or of the Second Life vision? Back in the, is it not just that we're going to be talking in a more immersive way, but is it also that we'll be like adopting new identities or kind of interacting with the metaverse in a way that's kind of, not skeuomorphic, but kind of, metaverse native? Or talk more about that vision or how you could see it playing out.
Yeah. So I think To a degree, we have been living in this kind of digital world, digital identity for some time. You could even argue since kind of MySpace really started to blow up, we started to live a good amount of our lives online. Now, most of these social networks, at least originally, were based on true identities, but that has evolved over time. And now there's plenty of websites where people are not using their true identities. But I do feel as though this concept of living a life online that's different from your own life has been around for a while. Video games also, RuneScape, World of Warcraft, like all of these. There have been people who have been spending a huge amount of time and developing really deep relationships with people online, not using their true identity. So this is not a new thing. You mentioned Second Life, another great example. How that will evolve over time will be interesting. I think we'll continue to see people innovate on digital experiences, on how people live their lives online. This notion of one virtual identity to rule them all, I think, is not going to happen for a very long time. I think it will remain siloed as it has done in the past for quite a long time. I mean, the way in which, for example, games work, Fortnite, you go to Fortnite and it's free to play. And the way that they make money and the way that they develop these amazing experiences and this amazing gameplay and this, all of these servers that run these games, all of this stuff is that you have to buy the goods from them, right? You buy the skins, you buy all that stuff. And that's how they make money. And that's how they pay their developers. And that's how they're able to create such a high caliber experience. That has set the bar. Free to play has set the bar for a lot of experiences. And I think that it's really challenging to be able to create something like that. You basically would need to scratch everything today and kind of start from scratch and build up this whole, interconnected ecosystem where there is this incentive alignment between all of these different virtual stores and virtual LANs and virtual games and all of those different things in order to make it work, in order to make this whole kind of vision of Web3 and this vision of the Web3 metaverse work. Now, it could happen, and maybe it will happen at some point in the future, but right now, the model that works and the model that people really invest big dollars in is not that. It's the free-to-play model. And, maybe we'll have some hooks in the future, and there's some companies that are making some decent headway. Ready Player Me is one of them, where they're basically developing this avatar system that a lot of different games are starting to use. It hampers the ability of the actual game developer to be able to make a whole bunch of money themselves. You can do it, and they're trying to figure out how to make sure that it's easier for all these different people to get a piece when they buy a piece of kit someplace else and then they play in their game. It's possible. Just change takes time, right? There's probably a better way to run the United States of America, but it's running a certain way right now. And to say that we're just going to scrap that and we're going to start from scratch, I mean, that's just not how things work. So to summarize, the metaverse has been around for a while. I think in the past, when I was growing up, maybe it was relegated to a much smaller group of people. I think now there's a lot more people who are involved and who are excited about it. Nabil Hyatt, who's an investor over at Spark, he's one of the smartest game investors I know, made the comment of if you're in your 40s or you're in your 50s and you want to understand gaming and you don't game yourself, think about when you are a kid and think about music and think about the place it has in your heart and the place it has in your mind and the emotions that it elicits and stuff like that. He's like, now kids who are growing up, they don't have that place for music. They have that place for gaming. And I completely see that. And it's really helpful for me to wrap my head around it. And so I think that there will be more and more people who are gaming and who are living their lives in various different metaverses, but a single kind of metaverse and a single place. Like, I think that we're a long ways away from that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Staying with the here and now and gearing towards closing, let's talk about how venture investors should think about this space in terms of even like mapping the market. We did it a bit in our last episode, but just to recap, there's infrastructure, hardware like Oculus, there's software like Unity and Epic, and then there's connectivity, of course. There's opportunities in enterprise. We spoke about that a little bit before, job training for various different categories, like education, medicine or healthcare applications. And then there's gaming, of course. Is that how you map the world today, or any edits or adds, or which within those, subsections do you see the most white space for startups relative to incumbents, perhaps?
It's tough. There isn't much white space. It is a crowded market. There are a lot of people who are excited about this. The figures are public in terms of how much time people are spending on games, on their phone. So I really don't think that there is a lot of white space. I think one area that I'm particularly excited about, and to all the listeners, if there's somebody who's working on this, please let me know. But I think, as we live our lives, or as younger generations live their lives more and more online, physical objects, the amount of weight that we put on digital goods, digital things versus actual physical things is changing. And I'm really excited about this concept of being able to have digital replicas of the physical things that you own. And I think that is a white space, and we're just kind of starting to have enough technology and enough compute to be able to properly capture objects in 3D. Polycam is probably the leader in this space. They're backed by Sequoia, I believe, and they basically enable you to use your phone to capture an object, be it a car or a ring or a whole house. And have a 3D representation of that model. There's lots of limitations as to what you can do with that model. But I can see in the future, whether or not it's for insurance purposes, whether or not it's, just to have kind of a digital locker, a digital place where you can store your things. Like, I really like that concept. And, I've invested in and around the space beforehand. I invested in Sketchfab, which is the largest 3D repository. They were bought by Epic Games. I invested in a company called Ventana, which is basically a content management system for 3D objects, which I'm really excited about. There's a bunch of different 3D tools that are being built around what to do with these 3D objects. But I still think that there is a fair amount of white space. Capturing these objects is still very cumbersome, be it for gaming, be it for commerce, whatever it is. And so, if you're working on innovation in that space, I'm interested.
Yeah, no, that's a really exciting opportunity. Gearing towards closing here, you mentioned Replica. There's this AI company called Replica. It's a kind of digital AI friend. There's been this controversy recently about people using it for digital girlfriends, and with VR, some people have utopian visions, some people have dystopian visions. And for some people, they're, the view when they think of AR or VR, they think of, Ready Player One, or they think of Eric Cartman kind of, slobbing with the headset on. What's the, maybe let's close on this. What's the inspiring vision for, what it will do for us? There's the Tyler Cowen view. I wonder if it applies here, where he says the internet makes smart people smarter and dumb people dumber. And I'm curious if that resonates in terms of, people who are using technology for good right now will continue to use it for good, and people who are using it as a replacement for other things or as a crutch will continue to use it for those purposes.
I think education is so important for well-rounded, good people, learning about the different cultures, learning about history. I think that VR has the potential to transform how we learn. And that is an inspiring vision for me. In the grand scheme of things, we are on this planet for such a short period of time, right? You think you've lived a long life when you're 60 and 70 and stuff like that. But in the grand scheme of things, it's been incredibly short. And we are incredibly short-sighted oftentimes. And I find it fascinating when I dig into some areas of history and realize that like there are a lot of patterns. And when I do that, I'm always happy that I do that because I think it really helps me get perspective, and it helps me be, I think, a better person, a better father, and so I really think that giving people a new way to learn and to really comprehend, again, history, cultures, all these different things that I think help make you a well-rounded human, I think are going to be a great thing for humanity, as well as the ability to connect with people over distance and things like that. But I really do believe that like, the immersive nature and the proven benefits of learning, retention, and engagement are going to be one of the biggest and most beneficial things that VR itself gives to us. And on the AR side, I think, we have gotten overly reliant on technology to be able to remember things and stuff like that. And I think like it'll be great to be able to interact with people in natural ways, being able to leverage some of the knowledge of my Rolodex and of my phone and stuff like that. Yeah, so those are my two points.
It's a great note of optimism to wrap on. My guest today has been Greg Castle of Anorak. Greg, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you, Eric.
Turpentine VC is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen and Econ 102. If you liked the episode, please leave a review in the Apple Store or rate us on Spotify. Hey everyone, Eric here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at ericaturpentine.co. That's ERIK at turpentine.co, and let's partner together.